Oh, okay, yeah, mine had doors.
Oh, well, I put a couple, we didn't have doors, and the little one, my elbow would hang out the side. Oh,
Good morning, Mr. Reddy. I forget y'all all looking at me.
Yeah.
Let's call the meeting to order. This is a special meeting to go over the stormwater management green space project. Who's driving this bus?
We're gonna share, I'll kick it off
All
for
right,
us.
go right ahead.
You guys know we've been talking about this project for a few months now. You signed a resolution, a few months back to engage our partners to help with this. You can see across the bottom all the different agencies, involved in, helping us with this project. It's just, I've said this before, for me, it's one of the most exciting projects that I think we have, on the radar currently. Rick DeGrow is with EPA. He has been kind of driving this for us, and pushing it forward, and we appreciate all your help and work on this. We'll go ahead and get through. So as you guys know, this started out as a stormwater project, looking at how we could fix some of the damage caused by the storm, as well as to solve some of our stormwater problems, and it quickly evolved into lots of help and lots of great ideas. So what we want to do today is give you just kind of a high-level overview of some of the ideas and the things that we're working through. If there's anything that you are adamantly opposed to, we will pull that out today. Otherwise, at the end of this today, what you guys see will be what we present to the citizens the first week in September. We'll talk about schedule. The week of September 9th through 10th, we have community workshops and also stakeholder meetings. We have stakeholder workshops with our homeowners association contacts, with our local businesses. We've invited developers, from the county, the CDC, trying to get input from all of our key groups here in the city. This is our schedule. So our first community open house will be on the 9th, 10:30 to 12:30 Central Time, at the St. Joe Beach Fire Station. And then the second community open house will be Tuesday, 6 to 8 p.m. And as you can see, we've got a stakeholder meeting with the homeowners associations. We have another stakeholder meeting with our business community and the CDC. We will, on the 10th, be coming back to the council at your regular council meeting and kind of just give you an update of what we heard the first day. But we still have that second community open house that evening. Any questions about the schedule and what we're trying to accomplish with the schedule? Okay. So I'm gonna let Dina just run through kind of the overview of the project and in its current.
So this map kind of shows all of the projects that this is referring to. It's gone past stormwater, as Tanya was saying. So these are kind of the high level locations of the overall project, and what it will hopefully encompass. We still have to get funding for all of it, but it will hopefully connect. You can see that green line is our multi-use trail that will connect our stormwater regional detention areas, the neighborhood around Maryland, that big green space we have there, 15th Street, the Parker Park, and all the way over to the city pier. So the idea is basically from one side of the city to the other, hitting our main green space areas. You would be able to get there on a golf cart or a bike or walking. So the first portion we're going to talk about is the stormwater. This is just trying to show an overview of our canal system, the blue line, that shows where we have ditches and canal, major drainage ways. This slide is just trying to show the green areas are green spaces. So we've got our dune walkovers, we have Under the Palms Park, Sunset Park, all of the accesses to the beach, the pier, the boat ramp, Parker Park, City Hall, just kind of showing an overview of portions of the city where we have recreational space. And
in the current design, the public pier is kind of the key feature in so you'll see that as we go through that.
I think this is just kind of showing where can the city have future development. So the tan color is the undeveloped space that may build out. So the regional stormwater detention, this map is showing blown out where water currently is draining. So it's interesting, but you can see up by Panther Swamp and close to the Harmon House, there's actually a split in our drainage system. Part of it drains north and it curves around through Panther Swamp and ends up in the intercoastal and then back out to the Gulf. But our canal system obviously drains, picking up as it goes, but in general drains and discharges at 8th Street. So this is part of what we want to change. This is just a blown up view of how that system is collecting everything and taking it, you know, through that big box culvert that's under the palms and taking it to the 8th Street discharge. The areas in this slide that are kind of that gray brown color, those are the areas where we're looking at potentially doing our regional stormwater detention basins to capture the flow, attenuate it, and change that drainage pattern to eliminate the 8th Street Canal.
No, not really.
Okay,
Would you go over that again?
sure.
You made a mistake of asking.
Okay, so in this slide, the blue is our collection system,
Right.
our canals and ditches.
Existing.
Yes. The arrows are showing how the water is getting from A to B, so that's the direction of the flow. And the grayish brown areas are the areas where we think we could potentially put big regional stormwater detention to capture it, treat it, attenuate it, and then ultimately change the flow. On that previous slide where I showed, where you see that it's going north, the goal is to eliminate the 8th Street outfall. We would store this water through regional detention and then redirect it so that all of the water goes north into
Oh.
Panther Swamp.
That's doable?
Well, we're working on it. I mean, that's the purpose of that $3 million for the feasibility and design that Army Corps has offered us, will be to do that, to do the design and figure out how it's doable.
So when you're storing water on a day like the last 2 or 3, we probably have problems.
Well, that's why we're gonna have a big regional detention facility.
I mean, acreage, huh?
When you treat
Yes.
it, what do you do to treat it?
Wait, wrong way. So typically treatment is just holding it for a certain amount of time to let sediment and
Yeah.
everything fall out. Okay?
Okay.
And then there are actual structures as part of stormwater design that also can get greases and oils out.
Gotcha.
But I think what we're proposing with the 85, the 7 acres that are green on this slide is to do a combination of regional stormwater detention and wetland restoration. So after it leaves the pond, I think what we've been talking about is it actually is treated again as it goes through those wetland areas.
Okay.
And the wetland areas, we've talked about maybe having a mitigation bank because we know there are a lot of single parcel lots in town that are in wetland, and that's hard for someone to permit and develop. If it's a subdivision, the developer is responsible for that. But if it's just a single family residential lot, that's hard. So there may even be a potential to use this wetland mitigation area as our own bank so that citizens can develop their properties, and we've set aside this acreage as wetland in these areas for conservation, which offsets that with the permitting agencies. So that's one idea that we've thrown around.
Now, without the trees, we're gonna have even more water.
Yeah, if you guys remember, after the storm, DOT had that 8th Street outfall dammed off when they were working on the road. If you remember how beautiful and blue green our water was for weeks and weeks and weeks. That's just an example of what we would see by eliminating that 8th Street outfall and taking it north
So we won't have any water at all going in to pick up.
from the 8th
From
Street.
8th
canal.
Street, that's the goal. The other thing that's kind of neat about our system and the setup, if you look at this slide, you see the 7 acres that are green, and we have a ditch going to the east towards the 8th Street Canal, and then we have that giant box culvert under the palms that also connects directly to that St. Joe property. So what that means is if we utilize it correctly, the stormwater ponds, if we had one on the 7 acres, maybe a smaller one, and then a larger one on the 85 acres, they would stage together and act like one giant system because they're connected by that box culvert.
Now, currently, we've been in discussions with the landowner on the 7 acres and the St. Joe Company on the 85. We have not had a response from the 4 acres, but that's not critical to the design. If we had just the 7 acres and the 85.
We could make it.
And St. Joe don't mind us running all that water over there?
No, as a matter of fact, they're happy. The St. Joe property had an old landfill on the property, so EPA is looking at that as a brownfield site and helping to clean that up as part of this project.
Landfill was where we're talking about,
On that 85 acres.
so they have to haul a lot of stuff out.
But it's not the whole 85 acres, it's a pretty,
Just this
pretty small area, but
Mhm.
I guess St. Joe is a willing seller, and we're looking at different funding mechanisms to help the city to be able to purchase that. So our first piece of that was doing a phase 1 assessment, which I believe they did last week. And that's really finding out who the owners are and talking to them, finding out what the history is. And then the phase 2, which we've also committed to, is going in and doing the sort of the monitoring, the testing to see what's actually there. If it turns out there is something there, then they'll figure out where they go from that.
Of course, having a beautiful beach is all to St. Joe's benefit too.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I think it's a win-win for everybody on this.
Yeah, and the other thing about the 7 acres and the 85, both of those parcels are in the floodplain, and they're also mapped as wetlands. So I think just from a development standpoint, it's not necessarily ideal property. That's probably why it's still undeveloped. So this is showing kind of what I was trying to explain about it staging together. So you would have moving from left to right, you have your 7 acre storage, the ditch, the canal connecting, and then possibly the 4 acres in between, but regardless, the ditch goes all the way through. Then our storm box at Maryland, and then the 85 acres. And I think ultimately, the 85 acre parcel is where we would try to discharge. So that would have, the 7 would go to the 85, and the 85 would discharge to the north.
Where is it going north?
It goes into Panther Swamp. It goes, filters through, it's basically, I think it's Cypress Creek is the name of the creek, and it drains north through Panther Swamp and ends up in the intercoastal, and then of course back out to the Gulf. On that side of the county line.
Yeah, right, yeah, like that.
Okay, so now we're moving into the Greenway Blueway system, that would accommodate multi-use, like I said, so golf carts, bikes, pedestrian. Our thought is probably at least a 10-foot wide trail, paved trail. And it can go kind of, Rick came up with this idea, it kind of follows our canal. So it can follow the canal, which meanders through. You can see all the different colors showing how each piece is connected. But since we have the canal, and that's the city's property, this is a nice way to get that trail in from one side of the city to the other, using our ditch. Whether it be next to it or maybe built kind of over it. And here, this one is showing the solid green line is where we anticipate new trail. The dashed lines that are kind of, like you can see up by the boat ramp, and then in the 85 acre parcel and the 7, we're kind of envisioning boardwalks through there. So if we do wetland restoration and we have this regional detention pond, it can be pretty, and maybe incorporate something like Windmark's done, where you have boardwalks that cross the wetlands and kind of creates a visual park feel to it. And then there's a green dash line that you see kind of connects City Hall to 15th Street. That green dash line is representing where we think we would have street, we would utilize the street and have our trail in the right of way.
Where's the acreage that St. Joe's going to give us? in regards to
The
this?
25 acres?
Can
Yeah.
show you on the, can you see that aerial? It's in this area.
Where is it up there?
This won't show on there, but
Oh, okay,
it is, do you see where it says the words Parker Park?
yes,
Just to the right, you can see the white storage, the white water tank,
I guess.
Yeah.
maybe.
kind of in that triangle immediately north.
Maybe
So Joe Drive, where we're showing that dash green line, it would be easy to pick that up from the Joe Drive and take it into the new complex.
So all of this is going to sooner or later involve that.
Mhm.
So you're gonna be working on that in regards to, like we have it already, just the plans for how it would integrate with the rest of town.
Yeah,
Let me ask something I've been trying to figure out. You see where it says Under the Palms Park, and the green line comes down and joins into the 88 acres down there. Where exactly does that join? Is that the park? Is that Maryland? Where is that? That joining down near the bottom of the triangle?
that is, the box culvert outflows into, a ditch that goes along the 85 acres. So that is at the end of the box culvert.
Which is at the end of Maryland.
Yeah, just
Yes.
north of Georgia, where Georgia Avenue ends there.
But it's not on the street, it's on the green space that the city owns where
Okay,
that
so
box
you are
is.
not planning to use the dead-end block of Maryland to do this?
No, it would be behind it,
The box place is under the pond, it is under there.
yes.
But this is, to answer your question, that is running down that green space.
Yes. So one thing that we've been discussing is, so we have the circular trail at Under the Palms in the middle section, there's like 3 sections that the city owns. So we would just extend that so that it would be, that entire green space would have a trail to collect pedestrian or bike traffic all the way from one end to the other of that box culvert. Whether it be a single trail or a looped one again, but the idea would be to connect the 2 outlying green spaces to that center one that has the park and the playground and the restrooms with just a trail. And then, well, we'll get to it later, but there's other options for that space too. This is showing areas where if we utilized the canal and the ditches and then also put a trail next to it, these would be places where you could launch a kayak. And then it's also showing crossings where our trail would have to have a pedestrian bridge or a crossing. And here are some pictures to kind of help visualize the feel, what we're trying to do with the trail, just some ideas. So moving into 8th Street Canal, unless anyone has more questions about the trails or comments.
We're gonna give you guys a copy of this right after the meeting, we're gonna email you a copy, we just didn't want it out there until you guys had a chance to see it first.
Where's the 4 acres? Is that part of the
That's
7 acre ownership
No,
no, it's actually owned by Diameter Share.
4 acres.
on both?
Diameter share E.
Sheridan.
But is it border the 8th Street Canal? It looks like
It
did.
does border the 8th Street Canal, but we have our ditch continues through there. So even if we're not able to get that parcel, we have the ditch and we would just.
Where do they
use it.
access that now? How do you access that from?
You can access it from, Hatley, if you come down, it's kind of an island actually, you would have to access it from Hatley.
Okay.
Alright. So, this is showing the 8th Street Canal, and this is tied to that regional stormwater detention, about removing that outfall and not having stormwater discharge into the Gulf at that location. This kind of shows a conceptual plan for how we would do that. So we would have essentially the 98 bridge, what we've envisioned is the canal would end upstream of the bridge. We would have pedestrian access down it like we are showing on all the other ditches and drainage ways. And then the bridge would become a pedestrian passage to the beach under the bridge instead of going over 98. And here, let me go to the next slide. That kind of, you can visualize it a little bit better, the way it looks now versus what we're proposing to do. And we would have dunes on the beach side of the bridge, but there would be no discharge of water, except maybe an overflow if it's needed.
It's gonna require maintenance too, right?
Just like it does today as a canal. I mean, it requires a lot of maintenance today.
The city actually, so we own, 8th Street now, we own the parcel it's on, and then it's kind of interesting, and it works out well, at the Robin and Wyson, we actually own a parcel there too. So if we were able to put a pedestrian trail along the top of the bank, we could actually get it all the way to the street at, what street is that? Georgia, Wyson, and Robin. You could kick it out there because we have that parcel.
Quite a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's showing a small, like a kayak launch, but I think, yeah, pedestrian access.
All of this is predicated on keeping the canals cleaned out and at least kayak worthy, which we haven't done along a lot of this. So is that going to be, the Corps has decided that the city will be able to do that?
Well, it's gonna be up to the city to maintain it. So that's part of that project. We're gonna have to document and understand all those things.
Should I move on?
Be planting more trees?
Yeah.
Lot more trees.
Yeah,
Are they all gonna be pine trees?
I hope not.
No.
I hope not too.
They didn't do so well.
No.
Alright, so moving into the detention areas and the idea of using those for green space. And this may change based on the design. I'm assuming that probably the 85 acres will have because it's more property, we'll have the main regional detention area there. But I think we'll still need the 7 acres and the box connecting the two. This is showing a blown up, so the solid green line is our trail, and then we've got the boardwalks that are going through the green space. And then some of this will be shared, like where 15th Street pops out to 98, that'll have to be within the right of way. Maybe widening the sidewalk, or maybe just using the existing sidewalk there. And this gives you kind of a visual of what it could look like if we were to do wetland restoration and have a pond and then these boardwalks that go through. In fact, I think the next slide, it looks like it's Windmark maybe.
I wouldn't doubt it,
Yeah,
we sent them that way.
that one, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to this, the other thing we talked about was maybe because 15th Street is such a big collector, it seems like for foot traffic and bike traffic, maybe at the 7 acres along the street have kind of just a little shade area, pavilion, something where you could stop and rest on your way to the beach. Okay. Oh, and then, well, we can talk about it in the pier, but, the idea, that last bullet point, the idea of using the wetlands as potentially also being a learning, feature for, schools to come and see and, do nature walks, I guess, or bird sighting, just some ideas. And then that is also mentioning the credits. Does everyone understand the wetland mitigation, how that works, the credits system?
Why don't you just kind of
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so, a big developer, if you come in and you're going to develop wetlands, you have the option to purchase credits from a bank, a wetland bank. Here, the closest one is Breakfast Point, which is owned by St. Joe. So essentially, you're saying, I'm taking this wetland, but I'm purchasing one over here that keeps that wetland over here in conservation, so it offsets it. Or you can try to restore wetlands on your property to offset what wetlands you're affecting. But back to single family lots, which is what primarily ours are, we don't have a lot of big, I mean, besides the St. Joe development, a lot of our interior lots, it's just a small parcel. There's no way, it's just not feasible to, if you have wetlands, to try to offset the impacts on your own property. You need a lot of space to do that. So the idea would be that Mexico Beach, instead of relying on Breakfast Point, could create its own wetland bank for those citizens, and they could purchase credits, and we would have this put into conservation as part of the project and restore the wetlands to offset development within the city. Maybe.
Which can be pretty expensive.
The restoration or the purchase?
Purchase.
Right, and the city would, have to decide how much that would cost, but maybe it would be cheaper than Breakfast Point. Okay, so moving to Under the Palms, this area, we have a lot of green space there. It would be, the idea was to connect, like I was saying, those two undeveloped, unvacant pieces to the portion of Under the Palms that has the playground, that has the restroom pavilion. So we were thinking we would extend that trail to go from one side to the other, so that if you live in that neighborhood, you can get there, and kids can get to the playground without actually having to be in the street. This shows kind of a conceptual idea of how we might do that. It does include planting additional trees to try to create a visual barrier from the houses. Right now it's very open, whereas before, there were a lot of bushes and shrubs that kind of gave the adjacent property owners some privacy. So there would definitely be a landscaping aspect to it, but it's kind of a blank slate. There's lots of space there if we wanted to come up with other things besides just the trail to put there. I think we had thrown around some ideas, maybe it was on a different slide, of things we could do, like maybe pickleball or frisbee golf, or just that's for the community to decide, but there's a lot of space, and if we had the trail, then it would all be connected.
Well, we could put, we have more old folks than we have children, along the trail, like I did at the facility I used to work with. We had exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah, adult exercise.
Adult exercise,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that turned out real well.
Right. Yeah, I think there's enough space to do that. We have to be careful of the box culverts. We don't want to impact that, but I think the width of that is maybe 100 feet, so I think you could fit a lot in there. Just things to think about. And then Parker Park, restoring Parker Park, as you all know, we had done a conceptual plan with a planner a couple years ago and got a lot of public input on the park as far as features to put in. That may have changed, so we can develop this further, like change the layout, the conceptual layout for the park. But back then, the main things were the entrance road in, the grass parking with a rear exit to 26th Street, a trail, the vendor stations for like the farmer's market, a pavilion, maybe a fishing dock, our stage, and then an observation tower with a pedestrian access from Highway 98, the sidewalks there, across our moat into the park.
So I don't see you covering any of the moat.
Hold on, Jerry, hold on. So we didn't forget.
We did not forget.
So Rick's group came up with two options for the park. Option A does not include filling in the moat, and it's kind of shifting those features around and changing the layout a little bit, but some of the main themes are still there.
Did you move the bathroom in the center of the park?
No, we just tore it down. We're gonna bulldoze it.
Yes, they're over off to the side.
Thank
here.
you.
Good.
Yeah, it's
So
that
it'll be
building you
Potty
see
Park.
combined with the pavilion. And then this was option B, which does, you see that we're filled the moat there along that?
What happened to the moat?
Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering, excuse me, are we gonna require with all this more parking? And where are you gonna put more parking?
Internally, we've discussed, I think before the parking was sufficient, I don't think we could get away with less, but I think we could probably go back with what we had. unless you.
Well, we never did anything there.
We were starting to do our
We
music
did.
in the park, we did our, Saturday, the farmer's market, which was a busy place, both of those. We would continue doing right-of-way parking, just like we did before, we had a large event there. And the difference is, you know, what we're trying to encourage a more pedestrian-friendly community. So we would hope with all the trails that people would be taking their golf carts, their bikes, walking versus everybody driving their car there.
Yeah, I like using some of the mode.
Yeah. So this is showing off of 98 along the canal and then a bridge into the park so that you could access it from the sidewalk.
Is the city looking at, getting, what was it, Island RV Park, that tiny little space of land that used to be our RV park? Behind Summer House.
We haven't looked at that one. I think previously they had, wasn't it expensive?
Oh, yeah.
So, Parker Park, we kind of have a blank slate again. We didn't implement a lot of the things that we talked about before. We took it as far as we could, but now we can pick it back up and move forward. And it may be that we change our conceptual, you know, what was important before the storm versus now may have changed, but, it'll definitely be included in the overall plan. So moving to the pier. This is still in progress. Rick's group is still working on it, but this was kind of their first concept layout for it, to provide what we've envisioned is creating with our space there. Right now it's just a parking lot. Enhancing that with some landscaping and trying to create kind of a pedestrian-friendly commercial district to access the pier. I know one thing we've talked about is at the base of the pier, maybe putting in an educational center for like nearby schools to come and learn about the dunes and possibly Hurricane Michael, and then even not retail space, but a restaurant space that would be right on the beach, and maybe the city could rent that out. And then possibly, as it redevelops, I know we talked about maybe it could be, the redeveloped areas could be elevated, and then the first floor could be used for commercial space, retail space. So those are just some of the ideas.
Yeah, like people can still fish off the pier, right? And so we could have bait, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, somebody, even on the pier itself, I've seen business places about halfway out along pier
Mm-hmm.
where people could get their bait and get
Right.
everything having to do with fishing.
Yep.
So this is currently, that road is high-density residential all the way in, so this would require a zoning change if this is something the city wants to pursue. There may be some owners there interested in this. We just haven't gotten that far, but the idea is to make our city pier more of a, a destination, an attraction, a gateway, and allowing for some commercial.
So we're gonna have to
Residential
buy
mix.
property.
Well, it depends on what the owners may wanna do. Some of those owners may want to do residential, on top, commercial on bottom. We're just starting that conversation.
So you haven't talked, okay.
Well, we need direction from you guys before we even head down that path.
But the land use change would then allow those property owners to do that if they chose to.
On
And
both sides?
sure, if you want to. I think to clarify, so we had a pretty good concept plan for the pier prior to the storm through Baskerville Donovan. So Rick's group has been focusing more on, we know we're gonna get FEMA funds to replace the pier and hopefully improve it. But this is addressing where we don't necessarily think we'll get FEMA funds to enhance what happens between 98 and the pier.
I'm always concerned about parking because it was always a mess. Do you remember? Go into the pier, people that have houses on either side parking there. Some of them may be willing to sell some of their property. I'm gonna say probably most of them are not gonna wanna sell. But I think you're going to have to buy property in order to make it spacious enough to be convenient for people going in and coming out. And again, parking,
Right, and again, we're trying to encourage pedestrian traffic, your bikes, your golf carts, walking, not so much the vehicles.
But I think even without that, we could reconfigure the way that parking worked to make it flow better and more efficient.
How many spaces are there?
I don't know off the top of my head, I wanna say like 70, that's too many.
There's a lot of spaces.
It's a big area.
Just-
There were,
it
there
just needs to
were
be
a
laid
total of
out.
50 townhouses, wasn't there, about 25 on each side, so that's 50 spaces right there. So it's close to 70.
Yeah, I'm just talking about in that center section, that was public parking.
I
It's a
like
big
the idea
area.
of buying the whole property.
You do like, or?
Yes,
Yeah.
then you have much, yeah,
Mhm.
I don't know how much that would cost, but it sure would open up your creative
Yeah.
possibilities.
That's an expensive parking lot.
Yeah, that's an experience.
Okay.
Well, regardless, we could do some landscaping, I guess that's it. Fast.
That-
Landscaping.
Interesting.
So there's the Economic Development Administration, if you're doing commercial, development, business development, things like that, there may be some resources there to help with those homeowners, if that's what they wanna do. If they say, yeah, you know, it gets me above the 15-foot, whatever storm surge that I need to worry about, put businesses underneath to be able to do some kind of flow through on that lower level, if you do ever get, any kind of, storm surge, and it protects the homeowners above. So there's some different opportunities, and it's really just to sort of showcase options that might be available for residents if they're interested. I think that's really what the workshop is about, is to get that input and say, oh, no, that is not gonna work.
Yeah.
Or, you know, hey, how do we work in parking into this concept? And those are the kinds of things that the landscape architects are looking to hear from you and from the citizens in the meeting.
So today, we're looking for your feedback, anything that you don't like, anything that you would like to see that's not there.
Like it all. Ambitious, but I like it all.
Quick question on that 84 acres. That's, where La Siesta goes up. What is that gonna do to those people there?
In La Siesta, hopefully it will help them, because that 85 acres does lie low, and there is that ditch between them.
It's pretty wet right now.
Yes, it is.
I'm not talking about today, but, you know.
It
even
is, it's
without
been
the
wet
rain.
since the storm.
Yes.
But I think right now, the way it is, even though there's the ditch between the 85 acres and La Siesta, when they dug the ditch, it looks like they just piled the dirt on one side. So that ditch is not actually going into the 85 acres and utilizing that, it's confined to the ditch. So I think if La Siesta can drain directly into that, I think that would help the water that backs up in La Siesta, because it would be utilizing that space instead of trying to force it all into that narrow ditch between the two properties. But it's definitely a problem, that whole area is a problem that I think this could help alleviate.
If you talk to people who try to put fences up there, they can tell you it stays wet all the time.
It does, that's why we need to do something about it, and this is part of solving that problem.
And I think the 85 acres is a good, because it is low lying, I think it will be easy to get the water out of that subdivision into the 85 acres.
That's what,
Hmm.
I know you're skeptical, but
Well, he's always skeptical. But,
we know that's an issue, I mean, we do know
Well, I
that's,
think
that's
it-
something we
yeah.
need to solve.
well, you've got a bunch of old folks that live here, me included. And I think, what makes it kind of complicated, we're wanting to maintain a family-oriented beach. So we've got to keep the young people involved, but the people that live here are not young. So, I don't know if that makes any sense, but,
It does.
because we don't want my granddaughters coming here because they can't drink on the beach, that's their main, which we don't want that kind of traffic here. I send them somewhere else. So, we want the family-oriented beach and because, and it was that way before, we moved away from the college crowd, thank goodness. And, but, I mean, they can come back when they get married and have kids. We don't need them here then, before.
Not until.
Right,
What else? What other questions?
I think that's a good start.
Concerns? What about from the citizens?
Well, as someone who lives right smack in the middle of a lot of this, I think the scope is good. I think it's something that the town has needed to do for many years. There are some of us citizens who have talked about a number of these points among ourselves and at times put forth ideas to the city and were ignored. So I think the entire concept is good. I have major concerns about points of it that will need to be explained to me. And I have concerns about privacy issues, especially on my block. If you add crowds that come through in certain ways, I can't tell from that. I'd have to see plans better because I can't see that. So there are a lot of questions. I think before plans are certainly finalized, there needs to be more input from those of us who live in the immediate area that's going to be affected, and those of us who would like to bring the ideas to the council and this group about things like the wildlife area and other things that we would like to present before plans begin to solidify for this. So I think from a citizen standpoint that there's more discussion with us that needs to be done. Overall, I think it's a great step forward. I would like to see a lot of this happen, but there are some major questions.
So just to speak to that, this is the first series of community open houses for this project. This won't be the last. I mean, as we move through this and start focusing on certain areas, we'll be back with the public. I mean, you're gonna hear a lot about this. This is not, we're gonna have this meeting and then we're gonna lock everything in, because so much is still ideas floating around. So the community open house, that's where we wanna hear your ideas. We wanna know what you guys have, your concerns, the ideas you think would make it an even better plan. So that's the starting point where we start and collect those ideas and the feedback. So make sure that those ideas, we get those on the 9th and the 10th.
Okay, so once we get the ideas and we write them in stone, so to speak, how long would it take from the start to finish of this whole project?
Well, I think it'll depend on funding, because we don't have funding for all of it yet. So that's gonna be an ongoing process, but doing the community workshops, figuring out which direction we wanna go, helps us know which funding we're eligible for, which funding to pursue. So, but I also think it depends on the priority of the council, because I think if you push, obviously your highest priority is the one that probably will happen sooner.
Well, I'd say cleaning up the water is very important.
With stormwater
The
aspect.
stormwater, so based on the letter from the Corps, I think the stormwater project is going to be well funded. I think that one is taken care of. The ones that I think we may get some FEMA money for, we will get FEMA money for the pier. Will it do what we're talking about here? No, but it will get us started. And then the same thing for Parker Park. Remember, FEMA's going to reimburse us for the damage, but some of those things that we had planned to do weren't there when the storm hit. So to take it further, we'll need to get additional funds for the park. And then the Greenway Trail, I'm sure Rick has some ideas of how to get funding for that, but, and there's DOT funds available for Greenway Trails, and so I don't know how
funding, is it 100% or,
Depends on the grant.
Yeah, now the core is,
okay,
there's no match for the core
Gotcha.
though. And so Dina made a good point, so for example, the pier project, I mean, Mayor, you know this, every time we go to somebody to talk about the pier, they're not interested, it's just a pier. You put it in something like this, a bigger project, and it becomes very appealing to other groups looking at
Right.
providing funding and other sources. It's not just a pier on its own, it's part of a larger.
And we
And I
could,
think CDBGDR, this would be a perfect project for CDBGDR.
yeah, I think, the one that I was talking about that had the business out on the pier created jobs for like 25, 30 people.
Right.
And that can be done tastefully,
Mhm.
so.
And Judy, you had some comments?
No, I was just gonna ask, you were talking about pier, and, park traffic instead. You encourage foot traffic or golf carts, so there will be paths for golf carts.
Okay. That's the main traffic.
and they can cross 98?
Well, that's gonna be, I think
That's my
I think
question.
that's probably an easy one we could work with
Right.
the state with so many.
They were gonna wind
communities
up
doing
buying
that.
98, huh? Change our mind on 98, once they resurface it again.
After they reserve
Yeah,
15th Street.
right. Should be good for 30 years.
Do we have the right-of-way rights to that canal on the Corey property?
I don't know.
I mean, do
And
we have who owns that canal? On the Corey property?
I'll have to.
We have to
look that up off
research
the
it.
top of my head.
yeah, but that's a good point, because that is something we would definitely wanna work with the quarry
I mean,
development.
that's the connector between our end and,
Mhm. Yes.
our end and the other end. And
Yes, and Frank James, the
Yeah.
developer, he's been invited to the stakeholder meetings. And I know that, you know, when we met with him sometime back, he wanted to do a pedestrian walk
Right.
over the
He did.
canal into Parker Park, and they wanted to pay for that.
Oh, that's gonna be
And
great
do that for
for
the
them.
city, so I don't think we're gonna get any pushback.
Be a
Because this is
plus.
gonna be definitely help.
And something, it's, just to remind everyone, in 1953, there was a restaurant on our pier.
Oh,
And it was, I mean, that's sort of gets lost in the shuffle. But in 1953, there was a restaurant there, a nice restaurant.
how'd he do?
It did well for the 5 years the pier stayed.
Oh,
It was run by the patronists out of
oh, really?
Panama City. But that's something that keeps popping up, at least I think about, why don't we sort of think about that?
Yeah,
I mean, I think that's a very, what Tanya just said, this whole thing opens up a whole different avenue of people that become interested in what we're doing,
all right.
other than, and so we think of the commercial space, but, something on that pier, other than a pier, is something we all think about,
Right.
in some form.
Yeah.
In
How
some
do you, the canal, we were talking about kayaks, is there gonna have to be some more cleaning and more dredging or anything in the canals, or,
For sections of it, yeah, probably.
okay, but that's in the project too, and I notice now, I mean, we've cleaned them out, and all of a sudden, these weeds are just,
Healthy.
I mean, I thought, golly. Okay, so it adds, I mean, to have all this is still gonna add cost to us maintaining it too.
Mhm. Yeah, but keep in mind, we should be maintaining those storm ditches anyways.
Yeah.
But yeah, you might be able to have somebody adopt a stream or adopt a canal that, you know, that's what they do. You know, it's a new nonprofit that comes in and says, hey, we really wanna keep this going. So, I mean, there are lots of, until you sort of go out there and find out who's ready to take up that mantle.
Yeah, we've had a lot of volunteers here, no doubt about that.
You mentioned that crossover on 15th Street. That's always been one of my pet projects I've always wanted. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
About the bridge you talking about?
Yeah, what we've talked about is probably for 15th Street, we would have a separate pedestrian, bike, golf cart crossing over the canal and keep it separate from the bridge because of the safety.
Right.
Yeah, I agree, yeah, that's definitely, it makes me nervous every time. because
We
I'm
won't have to
walking
cut
on-
any trees, that's for sure.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I've always been afraid of somebody getting hit.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and it's, with the building going up on this side, there's more families walking on the highway to go to the beach. Yeah, we need to continue that sidewalk, and that's one way to do it.
Is this the same presentation the citizens see at the open house?
Yeah.
Nothing,
They'll have the presentation boards with the different.
okay, there'll be presentation
Yeah,
boards,
set up
and they'll just be
so
segmented from this.
Yes.
Yeah, there won't be like a presentation per se, it'll just be folks sitting at these different boards trying to get their input on
Okay.
what they'd like to see in that 85 acres.
Kind of,
Yeah, very similar that we did with the other, the first open house with the parking and the walkovers and all that.
and Rick's group is gonna document all of the comments and ideas so that, in a way that we can use them later and go back to them, especially as we move forward. I didn't, like,
Getting
looking for
grants and
grants,
whatever.
exactly, yeah, so. The canal through the quarry property is not cities, no.
But all this is,
But we have to grant permission for whoever uses something out, so maybe we can,
there you go.
Yeah,
you know, they have to, we may have to become ownership, so. Or just, all we want's a pathway, we don't want the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I thought it, I didn't think it,
That goes from basically where the shops are, almost to the park, I guess, right?
yeah, not far past the bridge, 36th Street Bridge, it go, I mean, there's
yeah,
a tees off there.
No, the Corys have got to love this. I mean, anybody with property around here.
Well, but all of that's a benefit to that property.
Yeah,
Everything we're talking about is a significant benefit to that piece of property, so.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if
Hmm.
we own
Anything else, any other
it.
concerns?
No, I'm anxious to hear how the people think of that, how our citizens and interested parties.
Maybe we should have drinks.
Drinks,
Yeah.
tequila.
Yeah, a few mixed drinks about 30 minutes before we start the presentation.
And this will be on our website too, won't it?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll wait until after, we're gonna send it to you guys, we're gonna wait till after the open house to put it out there for everyone.
I think it's a great start.
I keep thinking of what we went through to get the sidewalks.
Oh, yeah.
And just a simple
Yeah.
damn sidewalk.
Yeah,
This is, I don't know,
they didn't bomb your house, did they? No, not yet. But that was,
But,
yeah, I mean, it was terrible.
But after we did it, I mean, it.
Everybody-
I hope that some remember that, you know,
Yeah.
some will view this as the end of the world.
You're right,
Change.
absolutely, absolutely.
So we have, as we said, EPA, USDA, FEMA, Corps of Engineers, DEO, HUD, National Parks, is engaged, so lots of state and federal partners helping us with this.
Good job, thank you for the presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay,
Very good, very
that was
good.
it. I think Jenny had one more thing before you guys take
Oh,
off.
I do, thank you for reminding me, because it completely slipped my mind. We were talking about various education to help me in my position. There is, through the Florida Association of City Clerks, there is a seminar in October, second week of October, October 14th through the 17th in Daytona. It's a 4-day conference, and it goes through basically almost any and every subject that I need to know. As far as our clerk, I got each of y'all to print out here, so y'all can see kind of the itinerary and the cost. I'm a member, I've signed up to be a member, so it'll cost me, for the whole event, it's $400 for registration, and then the hotel for 5 nights is $129 a night, so I'm looking at right at maybe $1,400 to $1,500 total in expenses. I just kinda wanted to run that by you guys and see if that was acceptable to you. I do have in our budget $2,500 for
education and training, so it stays within that mark, and it would be, I can do this for 3 years in a row, every October go to the Fall Academy, and, that'll earn my 120 hours, and I'll become a certified city clerk.
Good idea.
Good idea. That's what you need to do.
Yeah.
Go for it,
Yeah,
Now,
we like it.
Okay. That's
Being
it.
over
You
there.
know, can't do much.
do they have a, now it's on here to put it up to the city council?
You know, I didn't see that one, but I'm not, y'all haven't scared me too much yet. You're all good for me.
Just a point, you said you have that in your budget for starting October first,
Yes, yes,
not in your current budget.
correct. Actually, I think that for the, city clerk in every budget, there's been $2,500
Has
for
there been?
training. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and even in the 2019 budget, there's a $2,500.
Okay. All right, anything else, Tanya, is there any motion for adjournment?
Yeah, some of the second, third.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dana, Tanya, for putting that together.
Good job.
Good job. Good job.
Yes, sir.
Oh,
About 28 years.
Just you.
I don't think
Teresa
so,
Pearson.
probably not.
Teresa Pearson, a little